Hello sports fans, welcome to Spruce Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 4 NFL predictions. So last week I had a record of 11-5, and that brings my record on the season to 35-13. Kicking things off this week on Thursday Night Football, we have the Cardinals hosting the Seahawks. And this is an interesting game. Both these teams have been pretty solid so far, as both teams are 2-1. For the Cardinals, they lost their first game of the season last week to the 49ers. And the Seahawks, they've won back-to-back games after a Week 1 loss that was also against the 49ers. Now, a big reason the Seahawks have won back-to-back games has been their offense. They scored 31 in Week 2 and 44 last week. Although they get a pretty tough matchup this week facing a Cardinals defense that has played really well, as they're allowing 17 points per game through their first 3 games, which ranks 5th in the NFL. Then on the flip side, the Cardinals offense hasn't really been too impressive, scoring about 20 points per game. Plus, now they're going to be without James Conner, as he's out for the year with a foot injury. And they match up against a Seahawks defense that's really good, allowing 15.7 points per game, which is second best in the league. Well, I think this is going to be a lower scoring game because both these teams have top 5 scoring defenses. And because of that, I really think this game can go either way. But I'm going to take the Seahawks to get the win. Their offense has been playing pretty well. I could see them playing fairly well once again, even though they're playing a tough defense. I trust their offense more, and the Seahawks, they've also played really well against the Cardinals as of late, winning the last 7 meetings. So I'm going to take the Seahawks in a lower scoring game, 20-14. Moving to the games on Sunday, beginning with the Vikings against the Steelers in Ireland. So this is the first ever NFL game in Ireland, and this is a fairly interesting matchup. The Vikings, they're 2-1, and they looked great last week in their win over the Bengals, as they won 48-10. And they faced the Steelers team that's also 2-1, and they beat the Patriots last week. On the offensive side of things for the Vikings, they're going to start Carson Wentz for the second straight week, as J.J. McCarthy remains out with ankle injury. And Carson Wentz was pretty solid last week, throwing for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the Vikings, they also ran the ball really well last week with 170 rushing yards. And I could see the Vikings having another good game offensively because the Steelers' defense should be good, but they're not great, allowing over 25 points per game, and they've been bad against the run, allowing 140 rushing yards per game. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Steelers, they've been okay. They're scoring 24 points a game, and they face a great Viking defense, allowing 18.7 points per game. But this is a game that could really go either way, and I think this is going to be a lower scoring game because both teams are pretty good defensively, but I'm going to take the Vikings to get the win. I trust their defense a little bit more from what we've seen so far this year, and as long as their offense can protect the football, I think the Vikings win this game. I do think it's close, but I got the Vikings 21-20. Up next, we have the Commanders at the Falcons. So the Commanders, they got a good bounce-back win last week as they easily beat the Raiders. And the Falcons, they had a brutal loss to the Panthers last week, losing 30-0. The offense for the Falcons was awful last week, getting shut out by a bad Panthers defense. And Michael Penix Jr. really struggled, throwing 2 interceptions. But Penix and the Falcons offense, they looked to bounce back against the Commanders defense that's played pretty well, allowing 19 points per game. Now on the flip side, the Commanders offense played well last week with over 40 points, and they did so with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. And he could be getting the start once again this week as Jaden Daniels is still dealing with a knee injury. Although Daniels, he's not the only major injury for this offense, as Terry McLaurin currently has a quad injury. But even if the Commanders have to start Marcus Mariota at quarterback again, I still think this offense can be pretty good. They played really well last week, putting up 40 points, and even though they face a much tougher defense this week in the Falcons, I still think their offense can play pretty well. And I'm going to take the Commanders to get the win here. I think they're the better team. I think their offense is still solid, even without Jaden Daniels. And I just don't trust the Falcons after what we saw last week. I got the Commanders by a score of 24-17. Next game, we have the Saints at the Bills. So this game shouldn't be close. The Bills, they've looked like arguably the best team in the NFL so far, and they face a Saints team that is arguably the worst team in the NFL, sitting at 0-3. And the Saints, they just lost by 31 points last week, as they lost 44-13 to the Seahawks. But I don't really think I need to go into a whole ton of detail in this game. The Bills' offense is great, Saints' defense is terrible. Saints offense is not going to be able to keep up. I got the Bills extremely easily, winning by a score of 38-13. Up next, we have the Browns at the Lions. So the Lions, they got a big win over the Ravens last week, and they're now 2-1. And the Browns, they're coming off their first win in the season as they upset the Packers. And I definitely think there's a chance for the Browns to pull off the upset again this week, especially considering the Packers beat the Lions back in week 1. But we have a pretty interesting matchup here in this game. The Lions' offense is second best in the NFL, as they're averaging 34.3 points per game, and they face a Browns defense that's played really well to start the year, allowing just 204 yards per game, which is best in the NFL. Although, They have given up some points, as they allowed 41 in Week 2 to the Ravens, and they're allowing an average of 22.7 per game. Now, the Browns' defense has played pretty well. Their offense is not exactly matched that, as the Browns' offense is one of the worst offenses in the NFL, scoring just 15.3 points per game, which ranks third worst. And they face the Lions' defense that is pretty solid. But this is a game, an upset is not out of the question, but I just don't think it's very likely. I think the Browns need to keep this game extremely low scoring with how bad their offense is, just like what they did last week. The only difference is I don't see the Lions' offense being shut down for 4 quarters. This game might be close for a little bit, but in the end the Lions pull away, and I've got them winning pretty convincingly 31-10. Next game we have the Panthers at the Patriots. So the Panthers, they picked up their first win of the season last week, as they dominated the Falcons, winning 30-0, and they face a Patriots team that's also 1-2. The Patriots' offense has been okay this season, scoring 20 points per game, but a big thing that's held them back has been turnovers. As the Patriots, they've given the ball away 6 times this season, which is tied for second most in the NFL. And that could be a problem for the Patriots, because they face a Panthers defense that forced 3 turnovers last week. But as long as the Patriots can protect the football, I do think their offense should play pretty well, because this Panthers defense isn't very good, although they did just shut out the Falcons, so maybe I'm underestimating them just a little bit. But I still don't think this Panthers defense is great. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for the Panthers, they scored 30 last week, and on the year they're scoring 20.7 points per game. And they match up against a Patriots defense that's allowing 22.7 points per game. But this is a game that can definitely go either way. I can see the Panthers getting the win and building off last week's performance, but I'm going to take the Patriots. I trust their defense more. They're at home, and as long as they can protect the football, I like their chances. I've got the Patriots by a score of 24-21. Next game, we have the Chargers at the Giants. The Chargers, they've looked great so far this year as they're 3-0, and the Giants are 0-3. Although the Giants, they are making some moves, as they have benched Russell Wilson and named Jackson Dart their starting quarterback. Although Jackson Dart, he gets a really tough matchup in his first start, facing a Chargers defense that's 4th best in the NFL, allowing 16.7 points per game. And it's definitely not ideal starting Jackson Dart against such a tough defense, but when the Giants' schedule is so hard, he's going to have to play against tough defense at some point, so might as well just get it out of the way right now. But I definitely think it's a possibility Jackson Dart brings a spark to this Giants offense, and they look pretty good. Although, I do think that's pretty unlikely, considering how good this Chargers defense is. Now, on the flip side, the Chargers offense look great, scoring 23.3 points per game. And Justin Herbert is leading the NFL in passing yards through 3 weeks. And I think Herbert and the offense have another big game, as they face the Giants defense that has really struggled. Well, I'm going to take the Chargers to get the win here. They're easily the better team. I think their defense plays well against a quarterback making his first start. And I've got the Chargers easily by a score of 27-13. Next game, we have the Eagles at the Buccaneers. So this should be a pretty good game, and this is one of the tougher games to predict here this week. Both these teams, they've played pretty well so far as they're 3-0, and I think this should be a pretty good game. The offense for the Eagles, they played well last week with a season-high 33 points, and they finally got the pass game going as Jalen Hurts threw for 3 touchdowns. And I think that's big because I think the Eagles could need to rely on throwing the ball this week because they face a Buccaneers defense that is great against the run, allowing just 84 rushing yards per game and 3.6 yards per attempt. And on top of the Buccaneers defense being great against the run, the Eagles already haven't been amazing on the ground. They've been good, just not as good as you would expect from the Eagles. As the Eagles, they're rushing for 122 rushing yards per game. Now, on the flip side, the Buccaneers offense has been good, scoring an average of 24 points per game, but there's a lot of injury news for the Buccaneers offense. As Mike Evans is likely out with a hamstring injury, although star left tackle Tristan Wirfs and Chris Godwin should be able to make their season debut. And that is definitely big for the Buccaneers, especially getting Wirfs back, who's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. But overall, the Buccaneers offense, they match up against the Eagles defense that is pretty solid, allowing 21 points per game. But this is a game that could really go either way, and this is a very tough game to predict. But I think this game really comes down to 2 things. One, can the Buccaneers protect Baker Mayfield? They haven't done a great job of that so far this year, but I think the return of Tristan Wirfs is definitely going to help. The second thing is, can the Eagles throw the ball? Because I really don't know what their pass game is going to look like. They threw it fairly well last week, that's really because they had to get back into the game. But I don't really trust this Eagles passing offense. I think Jalen Hurts is pretty overrated, and I just don't really think they're very consistent. And that's not only this year, that dates back to the end of last year as well. But this is a game that could really go either way, but I'm going to take the Buccaneers to get the win. I think this game gets decided late in the 4th quarter. We've already seen Baker Mayfield lead the Buccaneers on 3 game-winning touchdown drives this season, I think it happens again. I got the Buccaneers improving to 4-0 and handing the Eagles their first loss, and I got the Buccaneers winning by a score of 26-21. Moving on, we have the Titans at the Texans. So this is a huge game for the Texans, because they have been awful so far this year as they're 0-3, and this is pretty much a must-win game. Now, the Texans do have a pretty good opportunity to get their first win of the season, as they face a Titans team that isn't great, but at the same time, this is also a decent chance for the Titans to get their first win because of how bad the Texans have been. But this game should be pretty interesting. The offense for the Texans has been awful, as they're worse in the NFL, scoring just 12.7 points per game, but I do think they have a good chance to get the offense going, facing a Titans defense allowing over 30 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Titans offense has not been good, scoring just 17 points per game, and they don't have to face an elite Texans defense. But I think this is going to be a lower scoring game when you factor in both these teams are not good offensively, but I think the Texans defense is the best unit in this game. I think that is the clear difference, and I got the Texans in a low scoring game, 16-10. Up next, we have the Colts at the Rams. So this is a really interesting game. The Rams, they're coming off their first loss season as they lost to the Eagles last week, and the Colts, they're still 3-0, although this is a big test for the Colts, and we're going to learn a lot about them, and we're going to learn just how good they really are. But a big reason the Colts have been so good this year is their offense, as they're second best in the NFL, scoring 34.3 points per game. And the Colts, they've also done a great job protecting Daniel Jones, as he's been sacked just twice, which is fewest among any quarterback. But the Colts offense, they get tested in a big way this week, facing a great Rams defense, which is allowing about 20 points per game, and they've also gotten 12 sacks, which is tied for most in the NFL. Now, on the flip side, the Rams offense is also good, as they're scoring 24.3 points per game, and they match up against a Colts defense that's allowing 18.7 points per contest. But this is a really tough game to predict, and I do think this Colts team is pretty good, but I'm going to take the Rams to get the win. I think they're the better team overall. I think their defense is able to contain the Colts offense. The Rams are also at home. I've got them by a score of 23-20. Next game, we have the Jaguars at the 49ers. The 49ers, they've played well so far this year, as they're 3-0, and they face the Jaguars team that's 2-1. Offensively for the 49ers, they haven't been great, scoring 19.7 points per game, although they've been pretty banged up, and Brock Purdy does return from injury this week. And Purdy, he leads the 49ers offense against the Jaguars defense that has looked really good, allowing 17 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Jaguars, they're scoring 23.3 points per game, although they get a tough matchup facing a 49ers defense that is allowing just 16.3 points a game. Although the 49ers will be without Nick Bosa, who tore his ACL and is out for the year. But this is another tough game to predict, and I can definitely see this game going either way, but I'm going to take the 49ers to get the win. They're at home, I think their defense plays well even without Nick Bosa, and I just think the 49ers are the better overall team. I've got them in a close game, 23-17. Next game, we have the Ravens at the Chiefs. So this is a huge game. Both these teams have been pretty disappointing to start the year as they're 1-2, but this is a big opportunity for each team to get back up to 500 on the season. On the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens, they've been great. They're the best offense in the NFL, scoring 37 points per game, and they've scored at least 30 in every game so far this year. But they now match up against a Chiefs defense that's pretty good, allowing 18.7 points a game. Now, on the flip side, the Chiefs offense has not been very impressive, with just 20 points per game, and last week they were less than impressive against the Giants. Although the Chiefs, they could get Xavier Worthy back for this game, and that could be big for their offense. And I also think the Chiefs could have a pretty good game because they face a Ravens defense that on paper is really good, although they've struggled to start the year, allowing 32 points per game, which is second worst in the NFL. But while these teams have been pretty disappointing so far this season, I think this game is going pretty good and pretty close. And I could definitely see this game going either way. But I'm going to take the Ravens to get the win here because of how good their offense has been. I don't really trust their defense, but I think their offense will play well enough, and I've got the Ravens getting the win in a good game, 27-24. Up next, we have the Bears at the Raiders. So the Bears, they looked pretty good last week because they got their first win of the season, as they beat the Cowboys 34-14. And they now face a Raiders team that's 1-2. The Bears offense, they played well last week with 34 points, and Caleb Williams had a career high with 4 touchdown passes. Now, I do think that was partly because they were facing an awful Cowboys defense, but I think they could have another big game this week, facing a Raiders defense that is allowing about 25 points per game. Now, on the flip side for the Raiders, their offense has not been good, as they're scoring just 17.7 points per game. And they face a Bears defense that is okay, and they played pretty well last week, allowing 14 points. But I'm going to take the Bears to get the win here. I like how they played last week. I think they can carry it over into this week's game, and I've got the Bears in a fairly close game, 26-20. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, and that is the Packers at the Cowboys. And we'll have a live watch party for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. For the Packers, they're coming off a bad loss to the Browns, and they're looking for a bounce-back win. And for the Cowboys, they were destroyed by the Browns last week. The Packers' offense was awful last week, just 10 points, but they have a great opportunity to get back on track, facing a Cowboys defense that might be the worst defense in the NFL. So I'm definitely expecting a big game from the Packers' offense. Then on the flip side, you've obviously got the big story of this game, that is Micah Parsons' return to Dallas, and I think he's going to have a huge game against his former team. And Parsons and the Packers' defense, they're the best scoring defense in the NFL, along with 14.7 points per game. And they face the Cowboys' offense is solid, although they will be without their star receiver, CeeDee Lamb. But I've got the Packers in this game, and I don't really think it's that close. I think the Packers' offense has a huge game against an awful Cowboys defense. I think their defense continues to dominate, and I got the Packers winning really easily, 34-13. Moving to the games we have on Monday, beginning with the Jets at the Dolphins. So this game probably isn't going to be very good, as we have the 0-3 Dolphins against the 0-3 Jets. And neither team is very good. On the offensive side of the ball for the Jets, they're scoring 23 points per game, although something positive is they are getting Justin Fields back from injury after he was out last week with a concussion. But Fields and the Jets offense, they face a terrible Dolphins defense that is allowing 32.3 points per game. And the Dolphins, their defense is also one of the worst defenses against the run. Then on the flip side, the Dolphins offense is also not been good, as they're scoring 18.7 points per game, and Tua has been awful so far for the Dolphins. Although I do think the Dolphins, they could have a decent offensive game, as they face the Jets defense that is allowing 31 points a game. But this is a game where I really have no idea who to take, because both these teams are pretty bad. I could see the Dolphins getting the win because they're at home, but I'm going to take the Jets. They've at least been competitive so far this year. They've looked a little bit better. I think they run the ball well, and I've got the Jets winning by a score of 23-17. And our final game, we've got the Bengals at the Broncos. And we'll have a live watch party for this game starting about 8:15 Eastern Time on Monday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is an interesting game. The Bengals, they were terrible last week, getting destroyed 48-10 against the Vikings, and they're now 2-1. And the Broncos, they're 1-2, and coming off a close loss to the Chargers. For the Broncos, they've been pretty disappointing so far this season, especially offensively, as Bo Nix hasn't played that well, and the Broncos are scoring 22.7 points per game. But this is a really good opportunity for the Broncos offense to get going, as they face a bad Bengals defense that's allowing 30.3 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the Bengals offense was not good last week, scoring just 10 points and turning it over 5 times. And that is a terrible matchup for them, as they face an elite Broncos defense. But I'm going to take the Broncos to get the win here. I think their offense finally gets going against a bad defense. I think their defense continues to play well against a struggling offense. And this is another game that I really don't think is that close. I got the Broncos big 31-14. But those are my Week 4 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think will win some of this week's big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I'll see you in the next video.